Hey, uh, well, something about privacy and guidelines or whatever. This is Ken Curtis, Kendon, Kendon, Ecurtis. Just so you know who I am. Uh, I'm that retiree that body has broke down from doing tree work for many, many years. The one that can put a lot of uh, things together that a lot of people don't tend to put together. Uh, we call that the ability to ace a mensa test. Anyway, there's that baby deer. I like to show that baby deer uh, in the event that people don't know who I am. I like it to be there so that people know who I am. All right, we're going to start this tutorial with a little bit of explanation of treason. Our founding forefathers were very, very specific about treason. And the reason that they were was because, just like all of the oligarchs' dirty bag of tricks, it was used abundantly by the old English oligarchs. Now, a lot of people don't like to give our old uh, founding forefathers the credit that they really deserve, because every single one of um, their constitutional values that they gave to us, the rights that they gave to us, is an answer to the oligarchs' dirty bag of tricks. And the reason I bring this up is because I think in today's world it's getting lost. People aren't understanding the importance of what they founded. And look, no country has a perfect history. We didn't have a perfect history. Of course, with our slavery, we did not have a perfect history. However, they made a document that can change and ebb with the time of the people, and not to be changing too much, because the sheer fact that they knew every single dirty trick that the oligarchs would pull, and they had an answer for every single one of them. It is quite amazing when you think about it. You have a right to a speedy trial. You have a right to a trial of your peers. You have a right to face your accuser. Um, you have right to freedom of speech. You have the right to freedom of press. You have the right to all of our freedoms. Do you think for 1 minute that if some oligarch was controlling this country, that they would give a rat's butt about your freedoms or mine? They wouldn't, and they didn't, and they haven't, and that's how it is. And that goes around the world. Right now in China, if you miss 5 minutes of work, say you're 5 minutes late, you lose your whole month's pay. And God forbid you get sick without family to take care of you, because they have no answer for that in China. In China, you're on your own. Our government was not meant to be a socialist government. Ain't that baby deer pretty? Our government was not meant to be a socialist government. It was meant to be a limited socialist government, which is to say that we took care of uh, the people that became crippled throughout their work life, or that became crippled because of some debilitating disease that they might receive, and to take care of our elderly. That's exactly the reasons for our socialism. Our socialism doesn't go beyond that, because legal, responsible people that are in full health should be able to take care of themselves. That kind of goes without saying, and it 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 almost irritates me to no end to know that there are people out there that would, you know, that would give anything. They'd give their right leg to turn us into a socialist, uh, a socialist country, a socialist economy, a socialist this, a socialist that. The problem with that is people need to wake up. Where would that money come from? At first, it's great because you can steal from those that have a lot, and they might have been planning on advancing uh, the, the the plants that they operate and making them bigger and better, and being able to do things like that to correct some of the anomalies that they run into when operating a plant. I actually have worked in a plant, so I know a little bit about that. But this is not why I actually get on here, was to talk about socialism. We all should know by now that socialism is not the answer. We've seen it over and over and over and over again throughout history, and it's one of the reasons that the first thing that the socialists try to do when they start getting any kind of little stronghold in a country is to remove history. Even, people might be offended at a statue of Robert E. Lee, but I'm sorry to say, that's part of our history. And every time you remove history, you're doomed to repeat it. And so, why would you want to remove the very thing that teaches us, what road that went down, and where that ended up? We don't have a government that just automatically, hey, we're just automatically perfect every time. We're just like any other government. We have to plan out and prescribe ourselves uh, a government that will work for us. And when I say for us, I mean we the people. We've had some real issues with that lately. They've stepped on our Constitution in a lot of different ways in the past decades or two. And every time they step on another right of our Constitution, it just makes me cringe, because our Constitution, as I said before, is is the uh, is the answer to the oligarchs, you know, bag of dirty tricks. Now I want to talk about something I've written a lot about, but I don't know that I've done any post on it. I got to thinking about it the other day. Have I done a post about this or not? I really don't know. But let me get into it so that you understand. We've already talked about why our constitutional forefathers were very strict about the rules that they laid out for us to play by, basically. And those rules that they laid out, uh, freedom of press, freedom of speech, these are the kind of things that, hey, don't step on our toes, boy. Don't step on our freedom of press. Don't step on our freedom of speech, because let me tell you, you might stir up a hornet's nest, and you might not like what you get. But there's other stuff that's happened, and we're not quite as aware of some of the stuff that goes on as we should be. And I'll give you an example of that. Uh, it's now becoming more and more known, and I know there's going to be liberals out there rolling their eyes at old Kenny, because Kenny doesn't. Oh man, that guy doesn't know crap. You know how it goes. But let me tell you something. Uh, Obama is he was never a Christian. He was Muslim, and worse than that, he was a planted Muslim. He was put here by our enemies, quite frankly. And he did everything that he could in the 10 years that he was in office to bring America down. And, and part of me can't blame him for that, because George Bush was such a piece of crap. He went into war under false pretenses, and he slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people. You might even get into 500,000 or so of people from his country. When I say his, I mean Obama, from his religion or what have you, where we could be peacefully living amongst each other. And it only takes those few bad apples. One bad apple ruins the whole bunch. So part of me has empathy for Obama and what he did. But the other part of me knows our founding forefathers were very, very... Now what I got here? Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry about that. Our founding forefathers were very strict about what their definition of treason was. Now I'm going to lay that out for you so that you can kind of get a grip on what treason is. Because of our oligarchs, they didn't want treason to just be thrown around and used, and especially with lynch mobs. Oh, he's treasonous, and let's string him up. And so they wanted to make sure that our rule of law protected everyone, even the treasonous. Although I don't know that they did a very good job with Benedict Arnold. Because it was just like, well, we knew you had to do with that fella, and he did this, and so, But on the most part, we've done a very good job. I mean, to quell human nature, to see to it that our laws are abided by. Now I'm going to go into the law of treason under our Constitution. First of all, there has to be a declaration of war. And a declaration of war can be from the Congress, which is signed in documentation, or it can be from the executive branch, which is backed up by Congress through the appropriations of what they appropriate to back up the declaration. We currently are under two acts of war that have never been taken off of the books, so to speak. One act of war is our war on drugs, which was made by Ronald Reagan in the mid-'80s. They appropriated $470 billion to that war. I always thought that was a little bit strange that they catch Manuel Noriega. They got pictures of him and Barry Seal takes pictures of him and stuff like that, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, well, Manuel Noriega was a part of it too, But then they turned around and sent $470 billion worth of money and equipment and manpower and personnel and what have you to what country? Any of you young folks know? I'm sure there's a few older folks that know. But anyway, we sent that money that $470 billion to Colombia. Now, the problem I always had with that was Colombia's gross national product was cocaine. You could read a National Geographic and know these facts. Although nowadays, when you read a National Geographic, since the Murdoch brothers have taken it over, you don't get quite the same level of truth, if you will, as you used to get from a National Geographic. I pretty much have read most National Geographics front to back, and Reader's Digest, Popular Science. I like those kind of things. Anyway, that being neither here nor there doesn't really matter. It has no bearing on the case whatsoever of what I'm trying to speak of right now. The point is that the Congress appropriated a huge amount of money to back that executive branch declaration of war. Now, we had another declaration of war recently, and that was, and Lord knows, can't stand the guy because of what he did. He went into war under false pretenses. Part of me says it ought to negate everything he did, but the other part of me says that no, there was a reason that we went to war, and even if it wasn't then, there sure enough is now. So anyway, G.W. Bush decided that he would make a declaration of war. And of course, he had the complete backing of, maybe he did that falsely because maybe he created the 9/11 or had a handle in that. Might have something to do with Bin Laden's son coming into his own right now and wanting a little bit of revenge. But anyway, let's get back to the point of the subject. A lot of people don't know this, but you know the only planes that flew during that 9/11 attack, where they grounded all of the planes? The only planes that flew were the planes that flew the Bin Ladens that were in America out of America. Just saying. Of course, they said that was for their own protection, because just because Bin Laden did something didn't mean the whole family did something, and that's true. Anyway, let's get back to where I was. Okay, treason had two very, very specific guidelines. One was there had to be a declaration of war. We had two. The second was there had to be a aiding and abetting or comfort of the enemy, okay, by the perpetrator of the person being accused of treason. Now, this is where a lot of Americans get confused. we love and cherish our freedom of religion to the point where we're even willing to accept Muslims in our country. But that's not just to say we accept Muslims in our country. We accept Muslims in our country providing that they abide by our rule of law republic, which is to say, they can't just come in here and cause all kinds of havoc, because that's not what our acceptance of them is. And so there's an issue when it comes to how we view Muslims. We view them kind of the way we do here, which is, we respect their right to their religion, and we should, and we do things in accordance to that. Well, there's a problem there, and let me explain that. I shouldn't have to explain this, but I'm going to. Iran is a state sponsor of terrorists. Okay, get that? They sent terrorists into Iraq. They sent terrorists into Syria. They've sent terrorists, quite frankly, right here. We've had terrorists here. We've had terrorists all over Europe. And what's crazy about that is the sponsor of that terrorism can often be traced right back to Iran. So what we're saying is, okay, Iran is the state sponsor of CARE. They're the state sponsor of ISIL? They're the state sponsor of ISIS. They're the state sponsor of Hezbollah. They're the state sponsor of Hamas. They're the state sponsor of the Muslim Brotherhood. They're the state sponsor of a lot of the derivatives of the Muslim Brotherhood, who all have their little specific things that they're doing here in America to try to uh, cause havoc and problems within America. Now, we can either accept this as, uh, well, we have to take a little bit of hit on the chin for the, for the right to freedom, or we can start saying, no, enough is enough. And I hate to be the one to say that, because I am a firm believer in the right of religion. As a matter of fact, I got a Muslim friend that's watching this right now that probably is a little upset with me, because he's a good guy. He's not a bad guy. Although, if you read the Quran, you really never know that for sure, and he'll be the first one to tell you. He'll be the first one to tell you that as a Christian, you're nothing but the dirt on his shoe. He'll be the first one to tell you that he can lie to you. He can say anything he wants to you if it's in the end result of jihad. So there we have the Muslim religion in a nutshell. and of course they're the religion of peace. And I don't mean to, I really don't mean to bash all Muslims, because there are good Muslims, and just like there are good Christians and there are some bad Christians. Look at, I'll use Timothy McVeigh as an example. What did he do? He went and bombed a federal building with a frickin' daycare in the base of it. I mean, come on. And then there's Eric Robert Rudolph, which happened here in Atlanta. And let me tell you, my wife and I were about 2 minutes from being at the exact same spot that happened. Just by fluke, we got in an argument, and she said we had taken the MARTA over there from a club that we were at. And she said, I'm catching a cab, and it's funny. And I said, I had a couple buddies with me. I said, well, maybe we should go back on MARTA, and that way she's not running around the club all by herself. But it was literally by the time I reached the MARTA station that they were already turning people back. In other words, they weren't letting them get off the MARTA train to go to the Centennial Park. They were telling people, turn around and go home. Which is to say, that's how close I was. And let me tell you, I was standing right there at the right-hand side of the stage, right exactly where that freaking bomb was. It's kind of a miracle all by itself that I didn't get caught up in that. But I digress. This is about treason. And what is treason and what isn't treason? Well, treason has to have a declaration of war. And not only does it have to have a declaration of war, it has to have a declaration of war that is the purpose of those that are within that declaration of war. And I think G.W. Bush made it pretty clear when he said, you are either with us or against us in this war against terrorism. And so that's where I say, hey, you want to sponsor CARE, you want to sponsor Hamas, you want to sponsor this, you want to sponsor that, it goes on and on. But here's what he did that's even worse than all of that. Okay? And in fact, I think some of that might have been able to be overlooked if it wasn't for this extra special piece of work. He actually allowed Hezbollah to deal drugs in America. And the reason I say that is because during the Iran-Contra deal that he was trying to make, he made it a contingency of that deal that Hezbollah bus that was fixing to go down, our DEA were fixing to take him down. He made it a deal that was stopped. So as a contingency of the Iranian deal, they were like, well, what about our Hezbollah guys that are about to be busted by your DEA? And what Obama did was he said, okay, we'll stop that. We won't bust them. Well, keep in mind, that's about halfway through Obama's term. And Obama's term, in all honesty, was for a pretty good time. We all know that a lot of presidents can't do what they want to do right off the bat. Okay, a lot of them have to, they have to kind of play things out. So maybe he was just trying to make sure his deal went through. But what he did, in fact, because Hezbollah had already been dealing drugs before he stopped the bust. Think about it. It's a bust. It's not an investigation. So he stopped the bust of Hezbollah terrorists dealing drugs in America. Which is to say, they already had a really good foothold in the drugs that they were dealing here in America. And we all know those drugs come up through Mexico. And we also know something else. We know that from history, we know that, we'll just put it this way, that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So regardless of where the fentanyl came from, it doesn't necessarily mean that Hezbollah didn't say, hey, we want to buy some of your fentanyl because we got this thing going on and we're doing pretty good with it, and we want to do more of what we're doing. And let me explain that. It started out with weak opioids in even grade schools because the Hezbollah operatives or representatives here in America were dealing the drugs, and I think they were dealing the drugs in high schools and even junior highs. It just stands to reason, make as much money as you can off of it. That was I guess maybe the primary reason was to make money, but at the same time, this is what they got out of it. They were dealing weak opioids to our kids. And those weak opioids will later turn to very strong fentanyl. But they didn't do it gradually. And our paramedics say it best. They say, we've never seen anything like it. We have kids dropping like flies. And what's happening is even our own paramedics with gloves on are overdosing simply from handling the victims' bodies. Now, had that happened just one time, you might say, well, okay, somebody made a mistake. But this has happened over and over and over and over and over again in different regions of America. And if you don't believe me, just go I wondered if I was going to get reconnected or not. Facebook, I don't know if you saw all of the gray stuff that was going on. Hopefully not. But Facebook's notorious for for just, they don't like me. I'm a truth teller, and they don't like it when I tell the truth. And before this gets cut off again, I wanna clarify a few things. Since Obama took office, 400,000 Americans have died of overdose. In last year alone, 76,000 kids, most too young to understand the consequences of their actions, let alone the concept of weaponized drugs, died of overdose. That would have not happened had Obama stopped the Hezbollah terrorists from dealing drugs in America. I'm completely convinced that that number would have been, it wouldn't have probably even been half. It probably would have been more like an eighth or a 16th of it, honestly. To put 76,000 deaths into perspective, in our whole Vietnam conflict, soldiers fighting a war, less than 60,000 soldiers died fighting that war. That war lasted 15 years. 75,000 kids, most military age, died last year from weaponized drugs. Or I should say, the majority of them were probably from weaponized drugs. And this is why I say that. Our paramedics say it best. They say that magically these kids have the same source selling them the drugs. But when our police officers go to research the source where the drugs came from, they're magically gone from country. Not just gone from country real quick, lickety split. I mean, they had time to pack their homes and get everything squared away, and so they don't just leave. They leave right as they know the bait and switch is going to hit the street. Y'all need a brick to hit you in the head? Huh? Maybe they feel like they have a right to do that. Right? Maybe that's why Louis Farrakhan said with jubilee, "Oh, white man's going down." And he did. Look it up on a post. You'll find it. Maybe some of our politicians don't want a closed border or a fenced border because of what they see coming in as being profit. They don't see the deaths that go with it. They just want to see what they want to see. People are good at that. People are really good at seeing only what they want to see. And yet, you can look right now today through the posts, and you can find a bus they made in Mexico that literally has half opiates and half fentanyl, all in one stash. And they said that the fentanyl was enough to kill half of the population of America. Mamas, daddies, please, please, please teach your kids about weaponized drugs. If you don't do anything else. And let them know. They're making the pills look just exactly like the pills that come from pain clinics. So they think they're getting a dose of something they know what they're getting, and they can handle so many milligrams of whatever. But no, they can't. Because all it takes is a grain of salt of fentanyl to be within one of them pills, and it's enough to kill 50 men. So, hope I got to cheer everybody up. It wasn't my intention to depress everyone. But look at it this way. You can train your kids. My granddaughter, I guarantee you, she knows what weaponized drugs are. If she falls into that trap, I'm going to be mad as all get out. Because I have done nothing but inform her about what's going on. You need to too. You need to let your kids know. And what are they going to do if they come here with their drugs and there's no market for them? What are they going to do then? Not only is all of that hard-earned money that's made here in America being fleeced from America on a venture of no taxation or anything, right? But it's all a ruse to kill kids, not just anybody. They're not killing adults with it. Well, I imagine they probably get a few of them. Most adults have enough sense to stay away from drugs. But they're killing kids. Kids too young to understand the consequences of their actions, let alone the concept of weaponized drugs. I love you. I'd like to say a prayer. Dear Jesus, please let anybody with ears to hear and eyes to see and hear and know what it is that I'm saying. So many lives are cut short. That's without abortion. There's so many lives being cut short for no reason. And granted, guys like GW weren't, they weren't any saint themselves. But two wrongs don't make a right. And targeting these children is definitely a wrong. And it needs to be rooted out. And while we're talking about rooting out problems, WikiLeaks, who's never been convicted of any crime whatsoever, who's never once been even been proven wrong about anything they reported, named Robert Mueller as the very person who took the uranium sample to Russia for testing. He didn't take it to Canada the way Hillary would like you to believe. He didn't take it to the Eurasia Company the way Hillary would like you to believe. He took it to Moscow. Let that sink in. Amen.